Hey everyone, Xyronic here. Welcome to Team Liquid's boss strategy guide powered by Alienware. Be sure to check out tl.gg/alienware to see what the guild uses to raid. Today we'll be going over the Mythic Crown of the Cosmos boss, Illyria, final boss of the Voidspire. Pretty difficult boss, but you have to remember looking at this video when Liquid killed it a couple of weeks ago, they were only 265 item level. Most Mythic raiders and even Mythic plusters nowadays, you're going to be 280 or even higher than that when you engage this boss, so keep that in mind whenever you are progressing on this boss. The damage and heal checks shouldn't be as difficult as long as you're dealing with the actual individual mechanics of the fight. Now, before we get into the actual strategy of this phase, I want to point out a pretty interesting difference between what Liquid did to kill this boss and what most other guilds did to kill this boss. So Liquid's strategy is to start with Dimiar, go to Vorlis second, and then end the fight at Morium. I wouldn't recommend doing what they do in this video. The more common strategy and easier strategy on your tanks is to go to Morium second and then finish the phase at Vorlis. Part of the reason for this is whenever one of these adds is not tanked, it gains a stacking damage buff for the rest of the phase. Dimiar does the interrupting shout. We want to get rid of that first regardless. Vorlis, all it does is like an AoE around it, which everyone can dodge, so the stacking damage buff doesn't matter that much. But Morium does like a tank buster that does a ton of damage, and when it has the increased damage stack on it at the end of the phase, it can actually end up killing your tank, especially if you get to the phase in rage. So it's just a little bit easier to go Dimiar, then Morium, then Vorlis last. That being said, the actual individual mechanics of the phase don't change based off of which way you're going. So keep that in mind as I go through the mechanics of this phase. You're gonna want to move the other way. But let's get into the actual mechanics of this fight on Mythic. So phase one is essentially the same as Heroic, just ramped up in difficulty. Everything does a little more damage. The adds have a lot more HP. The number one thing that's going to wipe you in this phase is going to be incorrect use of the void droplets. DKs, as much as they like to complain about not having a raid buff, are mandatory on this fight. The most important thing you can do in this phase is kill void droplets on top of the adds, because every single time one of those void droplet dies, just like on Heroic, it applies a stacking damage amp on the enemies, 30% per. So it's really important at the start of the fight to instantly grip both of these void droplets, and there's also two off screen at the top over by Morium as well. And then you actually have your hunters true shot and AoE these void droplets down instantly to get 180% increased damage taken on Dimiar here. Let's talk about the movement here, because again, this is going to be mirrored on the other side if you're doing the strategy that I think is ideal here. You're starting the fight kind of in the middle here, spawning these obelisks, and then moving left for the void expulsion. It's going to be the same on the other side. So I would recommend starting here, spawning obelisks, and then moving here for void expulsion, and then you can move back to the left for everything else. Now you'll notice on this difficulty, instead of just 3 void expulsions, there are 5 of them. One is baited and 4 are targeted on players. I mean, again, the damage is kind of scaled to Mythic, so it's just extra healing, extra damage for your healers to deal with. The other major change to this fight on Mythic, especially in P1, is how the Silver Strike arrow works, particularly in P1. On Heroic, you could hit the adds whenever you wanted with the Silver Strike arrows, and it wouldn't matter. It would just remove their void shield on it, and you'd be done with it. You'd be able to kill off the ad. On Mythic, whenever you hit something with the Silver Strike arrow, it leaves a permanent dot on the enemy, which will continue to remove debuffs for the rest of the fight. So that stacking damage amp that you're putting on them, you can no longer stack that, which means they become pretty much impossible to kill. So the only time you should ever hit an enemy with a Silver Strike arrow is when it is at 1 HP. So we already missed the first Silver Strike arrow of the fight. Second Silver Strike arrow coming up here. You'll notice Dimiar is at 25% HP. Our strategy here, just completely miss everything, including your other raid members. Silver Strike arrow on this difficulty does a lot of damage. It's like 200k damage to the person it's hitting. That stacked up with other things on the fight is pretty annoying to deal with. There's one tank swap in this phase. Whenever Dimiar starts to cast that interrupting shout here, when it gets to 0 HP, your tank is going to move to Morium to try to make sure he's not stacking his damage amp too much for the end of the fight. Of course, for the purposes of what I described to you earlier, going the other direction, they would be moving to Vorlis. As ranged, you're just going to be moving along the edge here, baiting these arrows, baiting the void expulsions, and then again, like I was talking about, once Dimiar is at 1 HP, literally ready to die, that is when you can hit it with a Silver Strike arrow. Now, the important thing is communication on which player is going to hit the enemy with a Silver Strike arrow. Make sure you're calling out, like actively calling out. This should be a raid leader call out. Whoever is going to hit it, say something, so the other person knows to get away from everyone else, so they don't cleave people with their Silver Strike arrows. Silver Strike arrows, again, do a lot of damage, so they can just actually kill somebody with the other random raid damage in this portion of the encounter. Kill off Dimiar, we're good to go. We're now stacking on Varellus, making sure we're killing void droplets on top of the enemy. DKs, again, your job on this fight. If a void droplet is dying away from the boss, grip it on top of the boss like we just saw there. Make sure that damage amp is stacking up constantly. We have 18 stacks of the damage amp on Varellus here. This guy is already dead. They can leave. But you see like how smart they are with the Silver Strike arrows. They probably could have hit Varellus with one of those Silver Strike arrows that happened literally 2 seconds ago. But there's no reason to rush this phase, right? Varellus is just going to stand there and snap back and forth. It's not going to hit anybody. You can hit it with the next set of Silver Strike arrows. We can just move across the room to Morium and finish off the phase. We're already stacking void droplets on Morium on the other side of the room here. Super clean with our movement. At this point in the fight, you're not too worried about void expulsion placement in this phase because there's not enough time left in the phase for you to actually care about the room that they'll take up, and all of that will get cleared when you enter phase 2 anyways. So your range can just stay in the middle. Make sure they're spread out for the Silver Strike arrows. Make sure they're not cleaving anybody with those. Again, Silver Strike arrows go out. Varellus at 1 HP. Communicate here. Make sure you know who's actually getting that mechanic, clearing the stacks on Varellus and killing him off. And then we're back onto Morium here, making sure we're getting as many of those void droplet stacks on him as possible. You can see he's already at 13 stacks here. They are absolutely crushing this guy. Silver Strike arrow coming up in 3 seconds is the last one of the fight. So there is a little bit of a damage check here, but they actually beat it by about 10 seconds. So they're totally okay here. And that's the end of P1. Now, funnily enough, Liquid did one-shot this phase and get through P2 on their first attempt of this fight. But there's a lot of optimization that can be done in P2, and P1 can be pretty erratic. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, especially if your DKs aren't on top of gripping void droplets on top of the ad. Don't expect to one-shot it like Liquid did. It can take a few attempts to get it right. But again, void droplets on the boss is very important, should be #1 priority. Killing void droplets actually can be a single target increase because of how much extra damage they take. So don't be afraid to send extra damage into void droplets to kill them off quickly. All right, into the intermission. So this is like the second intermission on Heroic. You'll want to kind of get right behind this line because a wall of orbs are going to spawn here. And you're going to want to follow those orbs as a group around the room. You do have a little bit of leeway. You can see Impec and Scott were actually on the other side of the wall as they spawn, but we're able to run through. There's like maybe a second of clearance for you to get through those before they start doing damage. But I wouldn't risk it, just stay behind the line. So this works the same way as on Heroic. When you get hit by the arrow, it clears your debuff that slows your movement speed. But if you get hit by another arrow while you have this debuff, you just get one shot. So make sure if you need to get hit by the arrow, only get hit by every other one. THG here, being a Warlock without Burning Rush on, is in the most danger, but somehow manages to stay alive. And make sure everyone's on the same platform at the end of the phase, because this is where you're going to start your P2 at. The boss is attackable for a couple of seconds there, so you can milk a little bit of extra boss damage here, and we're on to P2. Let's talk about the differences on Mythic. Right away, start at P2. You'll notice the platform is already shattered. We have 3 sections of the platform instead of the 1 main platform that you have on Heroic. There's also a Rift Simulacrum that spawns on this other platform that you need to deal with. It has a massive shield on it, and it just pulses for AoE damage. So you need to send a ranged hit squad over there to deal with this enemy. Now, these need to be mobile classes that can get across the void on their own. So things like Warlock, things like Elemental Shaman. Technically, any Drakthir can do it, but I don't think you want to send your Augevokers over there. Shadow Priest, even if they're a Drakthir, I think they would rather stay on this other platform. Just make sure you're sending people that can get back. Mage is actually pretty good at doing it, but know that if you're a mage, you will need a life grip or a rescue to get back to the team on this side of the platform. If you do end up having to send mages over, make sure you have that planned out in advance who's going to be gripping them or rescuing them back. You'll get a gateway to go to the other side, as you can see from THT here. You'll also want to place your personal port here. I highly recommend, as a Warlock on this fight, placing your personal portal kind of in this area of the platform. This is useful because it'll actually be used later on in the fight in P3, but I wouldn't worry about like maximizing it too much right now. So we send our hit squad over there. This is also where you're going to be lusting and popping your potions, trying to do as much boss damage as possible. Destro is incredibly good at cleaving both the ad and the boss here. Affliction really good as well. Ellie Shaman gets a little bit of value from Lightning Rod as well too. We'll be cleaving those down. So just like in P1, you still have Void Expulsions and Obelisks, but the movement here is actually pretty important. You'll notice these first set of baits for them were like actually not ideal. You would You would much rather have them like all in the corner here, but it ends up working out for them anyways. So the movement that I think is ideal for this fight as ranged DPS is you kind of want to bait your Void Expulsions right over here. Then you want to move really far out over here, kind of where THD is, to bait the obelisks. Now, the reason for this is the obelisk can spawn here, right? Let's say it spawns on Impec here. And the Rift Simulacrum that you have to hit with it is right here. That means you're gonna have to stand right here to shoot your arrow through, which means you're gonna be in a puddle the entire way. If it's spawned over here and you have to stand here to hit it, you have a lot more safety to do it. So that over moving to give yourself safe obelisk spots is really important. Now you're also probably wondering, what the hell am I talking about with hitting Rift Simulacrums? Well, that's the other mythic mechanic of this fight. So let's take a look at Impec's POV. He gets the obelisk, and you'll notice that he is aiming that obelisk at these Rift Simulacrums. There's 2 of them that spawn every single time you get obelisks in this fight. These Herald of the Inns, I believe is what the mechanic is called. 2 Rift Simulacrums will spawn. One will be on the close platform right here, and one will be way off in the distance on one of the other 2 platforms. You need to use these obelisks to hit the other Rift Simulacrums to remove them from the encounter. Otherwise, they will start pulsing for a ton of damage and will eventually end up wiping you. Now, there's kind of a trade-off here because the longer the Simulacrums stay alive, the more times you can clear debuffs with their Silver Strike arrows that they do in this phase, which is also important because it kind of extends the enrage on the fight. These Rift Simulacrums, when they do their Silver Strike arrows, anytime one of those Silver Strike arrows hits the boss, it reduces her energy by 5. When she hits 100 energy, that's when she transitions into phase 3. So you would like to reduce her energy as much as possible, but also you don't want them pulsing AoE damage on you. So it's kind of easier to just clear the Simulacrums the second you can. Getting into P3 early is not that big of a deal because, like I was talking about at the start of the video, the damage check shouldn't really be that difficult on this fight anymore with all the extra gear that we have nowadays. So clearing the Simulacrum here, very important. You see he lines it up perfectly, stands still so people have the chance to dodge. But you can see what I was talking about before, right? Let's back it up a couple seconds once again. Let's say the Simulacrum was right here instead, right? He would have to stand here in order to get that shot off. So they got a little lucky. He would just have to stand in a puddle. So I think it's really important when you're progressing on this fight to over move for every single obelisk spawn. Either way, clear the Simulacrum, get back in the group. They're baiting Void Expulsions back here. Again, this is where I would say it's very ideal to over move way over here for the obelisk spawns. And actually you can see they're doing that right now. They're over moving as much as possible. Still get a bad spawn back here. And you can see Shakib is actually in a pretty rough spot. He's going to be in a puddle, but they'll just have to heal him through it because he needs to hit this. He's actually even optimizing by trying to use the far right prong of the obelisk instead of the middle one, just to try to be out of the puddle as long as possible, but there's just no room for him to do it. Now, I think it's also important to mention that you kind of need to have a system set up for these obelisks. I think the thing that most people are doing is they're having melee shoot at far spawn Simulacrums and range shoot at close spawn Simulacrums. The reason this is the better strategy to do is because, let's say the Simulacrum spawned on this far other platform, right? Let's say there's a Simulacrum like over here, and then there's a close one here. If the range was shooting at the far one, you would be shooting right through melee, like every single time. And that's not fun for melee to have to dodge. At least with a closer spawn, they'll know it's right on top of them, but this one won't, no one will have to worry about. So again, range shoot close, melee shoot far. There's one weird thing that can happen on this fight. Monks, specifically Mistweaver monks, can be treated as either melee or ranged. So you can get like a range spawn and a Mistweaver. So if you're a Mistweaver player in particular, make sure you're aware of which one that you have. Other than that, I don't think there's any other role-based weird ideas for how the obelisks choose their targets. Remember that constantly throughout this phase, there are going to be pairs of players targeted with this silver arrow mechanic. Just make sure you're aware of who your pair is, and you are positioning on either side of the boss in order to clear the ads. The Undying Void spawn work exactly the same as Heroic. They just cast Void Barrage. You want to AoE them down, you have to hit them with a silver arrow in order to clear them. It's not really any different from what it was on Mythic. Actually, I'd argue it's kind of easier because they just kind of die instantly in the pairs of arrows are actually easier to hit them with than the random like triple one that you got on Heroic. So actually something I want to look at now, if we can swap back to THG's POV, a variation on the strategy that a lot of people have been doing is the second these obelisks spawn, I think is the best time to gateway across the platform here. You get away from the obelisk instantly. The next Void Expulsion baits don't happen for too long. And getting across here just gives you more room to spread out and deal with the boss. If you go a little too late, like you see here, you end up having this weird situation where you have pairs of Rangers marks that are like across the platform from each other. There's a little bit of a weird transition for them. So I'd recommend like at about, I think it's about 4:30 on the fight timer, just everyone gateways across. It makes the timing on this fight a lot easier to deal with. Also, you won't get Undying Void spawning across the platform from you. But again, it's just more of the same here. More obelisks, more Void Expulsion baits. Make sure you're clearing the simulacrums. It's this point in the fight where if you have a lot of simulacrums that you've missed, you can very easily be overwhelmed by pulsing AoE damage and you want to just get out of the phase entirely. As a matter of fact, like you can see they actually missed a ton of simulacrum hits here, but they missed a lot of Rangers captain marks on the boss as well. So they didn't phase this as late as they could have. If you hit every single Rangers captain's mark, every silver arrow in P2, you can actually gain an extra 15 seconds in P2 from what we see from Liquid here. So they weren't even like fully optimized on their boss damage, but they still have a 50% push, which is about what you want to see in order to kill this boss in P3. Either way, we're into P3. She always starts the P2, P3 transition exactly the same way, casting Dimensional Slash. It's always move out, then move in. Final Fantasy players know those as a Chariot and a Dynamo. It's the same every single time. Don't think about it too much. We're now into P3. This phase is a little weird timing-wise, but once you understand the dance, it's pretty simple. So it starts off the phase with an aspect of the end. This works exactly the same as Heroic. It'll target melee arranged in a tank. You have to understand the order that you're supposed to do this mechanic in. If we go back and look at the way they move here, it's always ranged break first, then melee, and then your tank goes last. The reason your tank goes last is because they can hold on to the tether for as long as possible without really being at risk of dying and break it whenever the raid is healthy. These aspects of the ends are like the #1 damaging mechanic at the end of this fight. They do a ridiculous amount of AoE damage. Your raid cooldowns and personals should essentially be saved specifically for bad overlaps of that mechanic with anything else. The second that the heralds spawn, so these two heralds, literally the second you see the second herald spawn, you go to the second platform. So they see that second one spawn, you swap over instantly, and that's the correct timing for spawning the phase 1 ad on your P3 platform. Yes, that is the phase 3 mechanic on Mythic. You have a Rift Simulacrum that needs to be killed, and one of your friends from P1 that respawns that you have to deal with. So the first one here, Virelis, probably the easiest one to deal with. Doesn't really do anything, it just does this Ravenous Abyss AoE around it. Your ranged are cleaving down the Simulacrum and the Virelis. Hunter True Shot's incredibly powerful for this particular mechanic. Just overlap, they slay these ads here. Warlocks do a lot of damage in this phase. Affliction is particularly strong in this phase because it can deal damage to all 3 of the enemies very efficiently. Destro can just cleave these 2 down, which is still really good. It's a lot of Shadowburn cleave, but it's not ideal. As a matter of fact, actually THG is just optimizing boss damage. He has Havoc on the boss here. But either way, as long as these ads are dying in a timely manner, it doesn't really matter too much what the cleave profile looks. The timer that you're trying to beat here is to have both the Simulacrum and Virelis dead before this Void Expulsion resolves. So they're kind of right on track for that here. Simulacrum dies, Virelis dies. We have baited the first Void Expulsion, and now the 4 marks will go out as well. In just a moment, there they are. And now we are on top of the boss for the second aspect of the end of the phase. Again, now they do it a little differently here. They go tank first. I would recommend going ranged, then melee, then tank. They don't do that here, but it ends up working out for them just fine. And we end up getting another herald, which you just run, you walk the dog, you walk towards this corner of the platform, face the heralds away, and everyone gets stacked up on the point. So this transition between platform 1 and platform 2 is probably the most difficult portion of the fight. You need to make sure that everyone is perfectly situated on this very tip of the platform. And I'll show you why in just a moment here. So, aspect of the end is going to come out as you want to transition. Same as the first transition here, you're gonna wait for the second Grasp of Emptiness to go off. So you wait. Your tank has to go early in order to spawn the ad here. But look at the positioning here of the Aspect of the End. You want to be able to gateway across, still be within your circle for Aspect of the End, and then you break as you need to. So again, range melee tank, that's the order you should be going here. Everyone gateways across, heralds go to the left and the right, and then you break the aspects one by one here and start worrying about dealing with a Simulacrum and Demiar. If you can get past this transition of the fight, you're probably safe to say you're killing this boss, as long as Illyria is low enough. So we have Demiar on this platform, our interrupting Shout Bro. Just have to make sure you don't get interrupted. It does a little bit of extra raid damage also when it casts as well, so make sure you're cleaving this one down as quickly as possible. This is probably the hardest one to kill of the fight because you don't have your Hunter True shots, you don't have your 2 minutes up. So make sure your ranged are focusing a little more on killing the Simulacrum and Demiar on this platform. Again, you're trying to kill this ad before the Void Expulsions end up killing off your raid. They get a second Tremor here, which ideally you wouldn't get because that's extra AoE damage for your healers to heal through. And then they're not quite stacked for the Aspect of the Ends, but again, as long as people are aware of where their positioning is and you don't have a perfect stack, you should be good to go. Once the Void Expulsion damage goes out, the only other damage you're going to take from this point on to the end of the fight is going to be the Aspect of the End damage. You are on a bit of a timer here because your transition to the third platform is a little weirder than it was before. Easier to deal with, but you want to deal with these 3 aspects before you get the next set of aspect casts here. So they end up breaking all of the aspects. Look at the timer on the next Aspect of the End here, 4 seconds. We want to get to the next platform before that Aspect of the End. So you can see people going instantly to try to get here before Aspect of the End goes off. And then we get another set of obelisks and another set of aspects here. And this is kind of like the last difficult overlap of the fight. Aspect into aspect. Everyone's HP bars are going to be low. Anything left in the bag to live through this aspect cast, health stones, health pots, any remaining personals, because you remember you used a lot of your personals and health pots and everything on the previous platform transition, but literally anything you have left should be used on this overlap from platform 2 to platform 3. Similar to before, Simulacrum plus this time Morium, the tank buster ad. You want to just cleave those down. This one should be once again a decent bit easier. 2 minutes are back up here. True shots are going to absolutely destroy this ad. Your hunters are also going to have their execute damage ramped up here as well, so they'll be doing a lot more crit damage to these ads. At this point in the fight, it's rinse and repeat, same as the other platforms. So make sure you're cleaving down the Simulacrum and the Morium, ideally before this Void Expulsion goes off. And then now it's just single target fight to the end here. That Devouring Cosmos is your enrage timer. Just like before, one more Aspect of the End here. This one you will need to break. Again, I recommend going ranged melee tank. Liquid was doing something different. And Devouring Cosmos will slowly envelop the platform here. Everyone should stack exactly on the tip of the platform here. You'll get one final Aspect of the End. You do not break these. Them breaking is a wipe. But you will wipe when this Devouring Cosmos ends up getting to your raid and starts ticking down your players and killing those aspects off. So just kill the boss before they kill you. And that's it. That's how you kill Crown of the Cosmos on Mythic. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. I'll do my best to get to them. I hope you guys have enjoyed the guides. Telegon will be joining you for Bellerin and Midnight Falls in March on Quelled and Us. Have a good one.